Okay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the When Black and Go Brown, Go Green Compassionate podcast. You could hashtag that, do whatever you want. I don't really care, just spread the love. Anyway, tonight we are going to be talking about some of the recent current events going around surrounding Asian violence and the history of Asian Americans in this country, stereotypes that people may have, and maybe some tough questions that people may also ask themselves to see how we could be better as a society at tackling these problems and just get a real sense of the Asian American experience. So I want to just start by introducing everybody, the panel, and going through and just seeing how you're doing today. So, Kira, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm hanging in there, getting excited about doing the celebration for Felicia in Pasadena on Saturday. And so I'm kind of excited about that. It'll be the first time I've done an art project in person in a year and a half. So it's a big deal.
That's great. That's great. And then you're feeling fine?
Pretty good.
That's good. That's good. How you doing, Paulina?
I rode my bike from Monrovia back home after dropping off my vehicle for a tune-up. So it was quite a ride.
How far is that?
It took about 30 minutes. And so from Monrovia to Pasadena, I would say it would be about like 5 miles. 5 miles. But I did some pit stops. Enjoyed the scenery route. It was good. I look forward to
good for the planet, right?
This Saturday as well. Huh? Yes.
Good for the planet and the body.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The sky was incredible.
That's great.
Point, the sun was just like, it was, the rays was just coming out of the clouds. Incredible.
That's nice. How you doing, Qinqin? How you feeling?
Well, hang on there. So I was last weekend. I was talking with Claire. I was on a Zoom meeting for anti-Asian American national events. So the people, many hundred people joined, talking about their perspective. What my thinking is, I can use my own artistic weapon. I'm sorry, it's not a real weapon, just you know what I mean. So artistic tool, and to really increase awareness of especially cultural awareness of Asian American. One of important media I use is the watercolor with Chinese ink. I taught in Yosemite National Park for all the public. So for a whole week for those classes, people just really like it. So this year, I submit my art, one piece of art to national art competition in Yosemite Art Museum and the gallery. So I was selected. Then they yesterday told me my art was give award. I said, wow, that's cool. So that's increased awareness. That's the way I do. Guess what? In the morning, I just talked with some national park interpreter. So in Yosemite National Park, they want to have, last year, they already, when the Black Lives Matter movement started, they recognized there's a marginalized people, artists, they need their voice need to be heard. There's very famous artists, but there's not too many, promotion on his art. But now they decided they want to do a legacy about this Japanese artist. So they want to invite me to, this is the first year they just started thinking about it. to start like every summer they will have legacy for this artist. They're gonna have an art workshop and events happening in Yosemite National Park. So
that kind of ties in the environment too, huh?
Yeah, so be in nature and also be like promote the cultural exchange, to recognize all the different people of color, people of different culture. They recognize that. This is not only for, like Asian American. In the future, they're going to making more and more. So, but because this artist, Japanese artist, actually when they described that and said, well, God, we have similar experiences. So he went to US just thinking he just came here, he will return, but he never did. He stayed in California, become an artist. He become a art teacher in Berkeley for UC Berkeley. So if in the future I engage more when the situation settle more, so I can share with you for those information. Because he also used ink and watercolors. The same, there's a lot of similarity. I can make a connection with this person. He set up a legacy when very important contribution he did is united both East, West. Like he have the organization for East and West. That means all the people from different culture use the art as a way to unite them together. That's a very big contribution when he was alive, but not, of course, 1970 or something, he's gone. And I think in the history, 1940, he was sent to, he was our teacher at that time in Berkeley, but UC Berkeley, but he was sent to concentration camp in somewhere in US during the war. So that's another history. Talk about that later.
Yeah.
That's it. I think I'm talking too much.
No worries. Wait, is anybody able to hear me? Okay, yeah, I think. I didn't see myself going green. But anyway, yeah, so we'll come back.
Hey everyone, what's up?
But let's just continue. Anita, how you been?
Good, thank you for asking. Just a long day. Other than that, okay, just busy. Good to see everybody here. And Qinqin, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Yes, I think I met you once, and I'm glad that you were here today. I try to communicate with you or add you on Facebook for that thread we have, but I think you spelled your name K-H-I-N or something.
Q-I-N. You mean
I tried to include you on that one, but I don't know if you were able to see that or not, because I'm
I sometimes I kind of Facebook confuse me because there's a lot of connection, whatever I lost. I quite often get lost in Facebook.
Yeah,
I email a lot. Do you have my email?
Yeah, I haven't. I somewhere. I have to dig it up, but I'm sure Kira has it. I can get it from Kira. But in any case, I'm also looking forward to Saturday. I haven't been able to keep up with all the arrangements. I know there's another one tomorrow, but I'm just going to show up and hope I know what's going on. But I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody on Saturday as well. So, thank you.
Danny, how are you?
This week was the first week of filming.
We can't hear you.
How's this?
That's great.
Hi everybody. I'm doing great. Just been really busy. This week has been the first week of filming for my online reality dating show for college students across the US. So it's been really hectic getting 16 plus college students from across the United States in a group chat, filming events with them every night. Today was our only day of break, so I'm here. And yeah, excited to present the presentation I made today. I'll pass it.
Can't wait to see it.
Yeah. And Rev Carol, how are you doing? It's great to have you here tonight.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Alex, and thank you for your leadership. I'm doing well, and My heart has really been in this place of compassion for a whole series of what's happened in this country and at the border. I'm closer actually to El Paso and what's going on at the border. So our world is being called to show compassion. I'll leave it there.
Jennifer, how are you?
Hello, good evening, everyone. I am tired. I have a 480 work schedule. So Monday through Thursday, I work 10-hour days, and tomorrow is my day off, but I volunteer. So it's just really busy, and I'm excited for things to calm down a little bit, but that's not looking like it's going to happen anytime soon. But happy to be here. First time here. So it's really cool to meet and hear from all of you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, welcome.
Melvin, haven't seen you in a minute. Good to see you again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See you, Melvin.
What's up there, everybody? I'm doing a whole lot better this time around. I had I don't know, when phase passing, it was kind of hard to participate with the community. But I'm getting a lot better. I'm diving back into things, going back into therapy, getting back involved in things that I was doing before. So I'm just trying to organize my life again at this point.
That's great.
Yeah.
Great to see you.
Great to see you all too.
Yep. And finally, Big Late. How you doing? I mean, Rick.
I'm not late. I'm on CPT, Color People Time. What's happening, y'all? I'm doing good. My family came in town. My nieces and nephews, they came in town. My niece is newly pregnant, so we're celebrating. I'm barbecuing. I just got in the house. Hey, Kira. Hey, everybody. Good to see you, Danny. Anita, what's up, baby? Melvin, good to see you, man. Good to see you. I still want some link. Resend me the links to your music, please. I want to show my nephew, please.
Will do.
Good to see you, Alex, and everybody else. Doing great. Not to offend any non-meat eaters, but we got the Costco ribs going on, so I'm a little busy, but I'm here and physically and never really mentally, but I'm here.
Great.
Doing great.
Okay.
Now moving on from my mentally incapacitated friend to another one, myself. Yeah, I'm all right. I'm chilling. I went up to Mount Baldy last Friday, which was really nice. Did some cool thing on one of the ski lifts, being that I threw up on it, which was pretty dope. But still continued to keep on skiing, which was even more badass. So I'm good. Applied for jobs, had a good interview today, and things seem to be painting a lot. I've been painting a lot. So
That's great. Great.
Having a solid time, but life keeps going. And now moving on from me to the news, unless everybody wants to hear more about me, which I completely understand. But nobody really does. Sense. Let's see. So in current events, there was something I just scrolled by, which was kind of crazy. A high school football coach in Massachusetts got in trouble because his football plays were anti-Semitic chants. So they'd be like, the audibles would be like, Auschwitz, Auschwitz, Hitler, Holocaust.
Wow.
Probably doesn't seem like a good idea as a high school coach. No wonder he got fired. But that's the times for you. Some would probably say he shouldn't have been canceled, but that's a time that, he's a high school coach. What are you doing? Other news, I found out this fashion site I was kind of interested in it. Danny and I had talked about fast fashion a while ago, just in private actually, and it got me thinking about like sustainable fashion. So I looked up this place called Bowdoin. I don't know if anybody's heard of it, but they use like hemp products and other like environmentally friendly products to make their clothes. And for every single item of clothing you buy, some of the money there goes to planting 10 trees. So I thought that was pretty neat. And I think that's something we could all probably do is like, look, where are we buying our fashion from? Where are we buying our clothes from? I mean, we all want to look good. Most people want to look good, at least sometimes. Not when you're at home, like who cares really? But when you go out, you know, you want to impress like your girlfriend, you want to impress your boyfriend, you want to impress your girls, your boys, the opposite sex, whoever, you know, you just don't want to look like a mess all the time. Bowdoin's clothes look solid. A lot of these other environmentally friendly places, their clothes look solid too. So I thought it was like something to think about. Also heard that like other ones like Fashion Nova or Shine, Shein, they're terrible for the environment. So, and they exploit labor, especially from a lot of East Asian countries. So that's some other interesting things I heard. And tragically, there was another mass shooting this week, which seems to just be par for the course in America and Boulder. And that's kind of a little wrap up on news for the week, along with my Chicago Bulls getting Nikola Vukovic, which now makes them contenders, and LeBron's out. So that's really tough on the Lakers. So there's the wrap up. But now we go to our current event. It's been a really tough go for a lot of particularly East Asian Americans recently with the COVID-19 and being stereotyped for it, blamed for it. And, you know, people could talk all day about how responsible is the Chinese government for covering something like COVID. That doesn't mean it's, you know, any individual Chinese or Asian person's fault. We got to be able to distinguish actions of government and, you know, natural phenomena of a virus occurring from discriminating against people and hating on people. And also, for a matter of fact, if you deny that COVID is a problem and you say COVID-19 is fake or it's not real, brother, yet you then go and turn on your you know, fellow Americans, your Asian Americans, and say it's your fault, doesn't really make much sense. How are you gonna say simultaneously the virus doesn't exist and it's a hoax and then blame Asian people for it? Now, it's led to quite a spike in hate crimes and anti-Asian incidents. There was like 3,800 reports of not necessarily crimes, but incidents of hate, some of which include crimes to Asian Americans over the past year, as reported by the AAPI. I may be messing up my acronyms. Like I'm not the best with that. I kind of struggle like with the whole LGBTQ plus, because once it gets to the plus, I don't know what I'm saying. But there's a lot of
Asian American Pacific Islander Association.
Okay, thank you. So there's a lot of problems going on, and I just wanted to, you know, bring us together today and be able to talk about that. So to start, like, anybody want to share their experience as Asian American or as an Asian immigrant?
Well, since I was invited, and also right now I still have a little energy before I just, you know, drop down. So I might just talk quickly. And yeah, you know, I almost 40 years ago, I came here as a student, but I never returned. I become a citizen, U.S. citizen many years ago, more than 20 years ago. So I treat this country as like my homeland, as a part of the, I'm a part of the system. But quite often I feel like me and other Asian American, or even they're like 3 or 4 generations, if they have a Asian face, they're like a foreigner. So they don't think they belong to the system. I feel like, so quite often I feel very unfair. I pay same taxes, I follow the law, but they treat me like a foreigner. So you see, I don't mean this group of people, we have a lot of open-minded people. I also have to say it's not everybody, but a lot of those white, you think they are like a prestigious type of a person, and there's a lot of them, even in the government, in the organization, in corporation. That's what I have to talk about. There's 3 major issues we have to deal with. One is historical, another is systematic, another one is culture. I want to talk very shortly about these 3 different things. Culture, historically, you see, just give you a few examples. For example, Chinese people come here to build a big railroad. Without them, the Pacific Railway is not going to get through. But when they do the ceremony in a historic picture, historical book, they're not mentioned. They're like just hidden. They're disregarded. They're like nothing. And there are a lot of people dead in this process. There's nothing to appreciate, to even recognize them. That's just one example of history. Another history is that you think Japanese American. I mentioned just a few minutes ago. Can you hear me? My voice is okay? Okay. So there's when the war starts, even though a lot of Japanese American, they're like here for many generations, but they're still thinking about they're not the citizen. They put them in government, our own government, put them in a concentration camp, put all together, make them suffer. A lot of people suffer a lot. And this is another example of, from a historic perspective. And there's a lot. I can't, make them one by one. But then sure.
We're going to get into that later too. I also wanted to know personally with you, right?
Mhm.
Like, what was the reason you ended up coming to the US?
Well, I came here like a student, right? Because then you all want to know like East culture. You're young, you want to know what is a different culture. What is actually, I had a chance to go to Europe. I choose to go to US because I thought US is a melting pot. There's all kinds of people come to here. Go to Europe, you might just be narrowed down with certain. Still at that time, you think they're pretty narrow, So I read a lot of information. Even I was in China, so I know U.S. as a place to. I was like a college student. You think you want to learn, you want to know all the things beyond your own culture. That's where I came. I want to be part of this melting pot and searching a dream. So but I also heard there's a lot of crime, all the things. And I thought, well, if that something doesn't work, I just come here, have a trip, then come back to China. So, but I came here, learned a lot of stuff and never returned. But still, I have to say there's a lot of good stuff here. So that I learned a lot of good people here. But I also, at the same time, I experienced a lot of discrimination. So there's like double-edged sword you see everywhere.
Definitely. And as an Asian American, has that like helped you at all with relating to maybe other historically oppressed groups in America, like African Americans and Native Americans who,
Yeah,
so I, just for example,
for
I've
sure.
talked with,
yeah,
I've
I have
talked
a
with a
lot
few
of
of my friends,
yeah, I
right?
have a lot of close friends as African American, and someone was my mentor. So that's why I start talking with Faye. We just connect right away. So I mean, because we, even though we are like a black and brown, we have different color. You even see that this anti-Asian, since a lot of African American people come out to support the Asian people because we experience a similar type of discrimination. We sense the similar marginalized situation, and we understand what we go through. So I do think I made a lot of connection from our way in my America with a lot of minority group with open-minded other. I'm not racist. You know, I don't look at race. Okay, you're the white, you're the yellow, you're the brown, whatever. I look people's mind. Every open-minded people is my friends.
I feel that. So something that, like for me, at least when I've like had a lot of these conversations about like, you know, treatment of different groups of people in America, I've also, you know, I noticed that, like, for example, I, as a Jewish American, have faced, you know, a wave of hate crimes lately that could make me really empathize with the Asian American struggle and or even, you know, the Black American struggle. And while it might not be as severe or as long-standing as, say, especially the African American struggle, it helps me gain perspective. Another thing I've thought about too, especially through conversations with friends, is even though like in the 60s, the 1960s, and so Jewish Americans were huge allies with African Americans during the civil rights movement, there's been fractures in the allyship of time, even though in a lot of ways it's still strong. So I've had the opportunity to talk with a lot of my Black friends about that. Now, I've also heard a lot of Black friends say stuff about fractures between the Black and Asian community. And if anybody wants to just jump into Qinqin, Paulina, Rick, anybody on this, I like, for example, you see, you know, during the LA riots with Black people from LA versus like Koreans in K-Town, there were big fractures that came there. And there's been sometimes a sense in the Black community, I know that they felt, oh, Asian Americans haven't been standing up for us. Whether that's true or not, it's tough for me to say. And then on the other hand, I know there's been incidents where it's not just been, you know, white people committing hate crimes against Asian Americans, but it's also been African Americans. So like, if you were to like kind of go and speak on maybe something regarding that, how the allyship could improve, maybe what fractures you've noticed, or like how you reflect on that, what would you say?
That's what I think. We have to go beyond the race. We have to think about unified everybody from humanity. Everybody have equal right. So if you go beyond your race and if you search justice, equal right, then that will go beyond. And you know, I think sometimes you see that if you focus too much on the races, each race, and in a certain situation, there's economic problem, political problem, education problem, then there's a conflict too. So, and that's something that in society, as policy, government, you know, education, we have to start working on that.
I agree. Paulina, I was curious, what do you think about like when there's maybe comments that could happen between like different minority groups where, like I was saying, you know, Black Americans may not feel that there's been enough Asian Americans standing up for them, or vice versa. Like, what would you say to, you know, your fellow American?
Felicia's Black. I'm Asian. you know, we were a good match, whether she was black, whether I was yellow. You know, we connected through our mindset. We connect through interest in the things we share. So, yes, I'm aware of my race. I'm aware of her race. We were aware of each other's race, and where we stand in that matter. And all I was able to do was support her in her matter. And what she will be doing for me right now is to support me in this anti-hate matter.
That makes sense. And I think I do think it's really important for everyone to support everyone. I don't know, like Rick, Melvin, anybody, Rev Carolyn, anybody jump in, but like.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in for just a second. I've had lots of wonderful relationships, close friendships with people of Asian background. In fact, I had a young lady from China who was an international student that lived with me for 2 years. So I have practiced peace and nonviolence for the last 30 years and really am open. Grew up on the East Coast, so I'm open to a lot of things. But I wanted to share 2 things. One is I've traveled in many parts of the world. And one of the things that is common is that the media is often used to portray people of African descent as robbers and thieves and ready to rape women and other things. So there's this image, and people are in fear without even knowing that the media has tainted their views. So they may not even be thinking about something, but they've been fed enough so that no matter where I've been, whether it's Egypt or India or Ireland, or it doesn't matter, there's always a look that questions and wondering whether, as an African American, I'm going to harm someone. And I am one of the least harmful people in the world. I think we have to really understand that the media has been used against bringing people together and has portrayed Black people in a very negative sense. The other thing I want to add, I wasn't here in LA in the Rodney King time, but I know plenty of people who were, and they have shared with me still a sense of pain for the way that sometimes Asians who got businesses treated people of color, always assuming they were going to rob them. And I've had that experience of going into beauty supply places and having people question, not being treated with any sense of customer service, but with a sense of, what are you going to do? And let me watch you, let me follow you. I've been followed around stores. So I know there's a place of healing, and I've worked with Hypen M of Face and other people, Ping Ho at UCLA Arts and Healing. And there's an opportunity here that I hope we all can open to, when our hearts are open with a sense of compassion, that we can start seeing each other for how much we have in common versus how much we don't know about each other. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to echo Carlene, that very important point. That's my next point, because I was talking about history, culture, and systematics. But I want to also echo that point. It's like a culture understanding. So similarly, in like Asian culture, they portray all the, especially women, Asian Asian women is, like a slave of the sex. I remember when I was even in Berkeley at that time, I was the intellectual people. I saw some of the comments when you're young, they see you, they just kind of give, just put you in that corner. It's really uncomfortable. So they really, I think the whole system, you think about mainstream, like a year before I was in LA, one gentleman from African American culture, he's a good artist, art teacher, all the things he told me. He said a mainstream art is all controlled by white man. He's told that to me. So what I was looking for, all the art, movie, all the medium, what, how much they cover all the different culture. We're like a multicultural society. We're all marginalized. We're all not heard. So that's why I thought our voice, like a different cultural voice, should be heard in all the media, in the museum, in the culture, in the textbook, in the education. That's why I want to go to anywhere they have this avenue, like Yosemite National Park, the very progressive type of organization. Get something and start to making my own little contribution. So that's the big thing I think in US we have to change. In the future, next generation will be even more multicultural of generation, not dominated by just by white, all one races. We all have to live together, understand each other about culture. Who isn't doing this job as a cultural ambassador?
And I could give you an example of how one person can make a big difference. I had a friend when I was at PBS who left San Diego and went to Atlanta and worked for CNN on the international news. She wrote the news. She was a Black woman. And she was the only Black woman in that department. And whenever they had anything to do with Africa, they would run it by her. And she felt like she was the only voice that was actually pointing out what you were saying, Reverend Carolyn, is they were always showing people from Africa in derogatory ways. They didn't show, what the reality was and the balance was. And so she actually had a huge impact on CNN. So that's what I'm saying. Like, you can do, all of us can do, you can make a difference by pointing out, because sometimes the media just doesn't get it until you point it out, so I think that's a really good point.
I wanted to say something as well. Periodically, something happens either on a national or a global level, some kind of
I can't hear you.
Somebody muted me. Okay, and then we, like, for example, I think back in the, when 9/11 happened and anybody who came from the Middle East was demonized, and so every once in a while we find somebody to demonize, or say, whatever's going on, is their fault. And then everybody gets lumped into that one little pot and becomes a target of hate. If today it's one group, tomorrow is going to be another group. I mean, I was in one of those groups too. And, exactly. And, I mean, to be honest, it impacted my life so much that we ended up like, back when I was a child or a teenager, we had to immigrate from country to country because of that same kind of attitude. So
Anita, what was the attitude exactly for you? I'm just curious.
I'm Armenian, so that's like one whole, another episode to talk about. But then I was born and raised in Iran, and at that time, I don't even have to go there, tell you what that's all about. And so that, I'm not going to bore you all with that stuff. But one lesson that I wanted to tell everybody is that, and I criticize my own people from my own heritage as well, is that everybody has their own pain of having been subjected to some kind of a hate or discrimination from whatever group or subgroup that we belong to. The key thing is that that should not blind us to seeing other people's pain. And we need to step up, because I feel like, you know, the ethnic group that I belong to, I mean, we were very sensitized. There was a genocide and this and that. And every year, I'm sure you've all seen when Armenians come out for the Armenian Genocide Day, April 24th, which is coming up again. I mean, I totally empathize and sympathize with them, but I'm also critical of, if you want people to show up for you, you need to show up for other people.
Yeah.
And I think that just that, as that saying goes, when first they came for whatever, I can't remember the whole sequence of events. First they come for one group, then they come for another group, and then eventually they're going to come for you. So I just wanted to sensitize and bring up the point that, if it's not your group today, it's going to be tomorrow, it's going to be yours. So you need to really think about, this is something that we all have to be allies. We have to be united, and we have to step up for each other. And that underlying idea of when things go awry, to start to demonize a whole group of people based on what they look like or what kind of accent they have or where they came from, that's kind of a cancerous thing. And we can't let that, eat up our society. And so just to learn that whenever you're subject to discrimination, that next time when you see discrimination, you need to step up.
Rick?
The question is the main group, the people who doesn't get to that, suffer for that, because those white supremacists, they don't experience that. That's why most of them control the money, control the system, control a lot of stuff. So the voice, the direction, the fix doesn't get to that point. So it's like a cycle again. For the sense, the stereotype, all the minority, the people, sometimes things happen, they will be demonized, they will be criticized. So it's like a cycle. Mm-hmm. So how could we get out of this bad cycle? We got to turn from the top.
Well, I think that, so if you look at things with a bit of perspective, there's this crazy theory, the white genocide theory. And the white genocide theory is basically something that they're like, okay, the minorities are trying to commit genocide against the white people. And part of the plan of it is that apparently there's this massive unity that exists between Black, Jewish, Hispanic, Muslim, and Asian people, in which they're all operating together through through Jewish elites, Hispanic immigrants, criminals, Asian governments, etc., that they're all working together to bring about the end of the white race. Now, I don't think that should be any of our goals, but I do think that unity, if it actually existed, would be a really powerful thing.
Well,
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead. I talk too much.
No, I agree with everything you said, Reverend Wilkins. Anita, you guys hit it on the head. Here's the thing. You're right, and Alex, you too. Like you said, there's this fear that they're being taken over, and but when I can't remember, like everybody here has probably been oppressed. Women, Black men, Black people, Asians, white women, Jewish people. When have white men been oppressed? And who owns the TV stations? Who's oppressing? When have they been oppressed? We need we need people to step up. And when George Floyd died, I saw my white brothers and sisters out there, and that was my first time seeing them, in droves of people, because I felt like it wasn't just George Floyd. They felt like they were being oppressed because of COVID. They have to stay home. It's all part of it. It was Black, it was for George Floyd also, but it was also I think they felt a sense of oppression for the first time. They felt oppression because they were told, no, you got to stay home.
They couldn't do. Yeah.
They couldn't go out. So it wasn't just they're coming out for George Floyd. They felt a little bit oppressed for the first time in their white lives. But like Anita was saying, you know, we have to, like, we got to show up for each other. But how do you show up? How can you relate if you've never been oppressed? Why should you have to show up? And when the kid is getting bullied on the playground, you know, everybody is going to point at the kid and bully him because they don't, you know, if they don't do that, they might be the victim. So, you know, it's like we need to, you know, it's hard to have compassion for someone when you don't know what it is to be, you know, a victim or oppressed or but I was looking at this YouTube video the other day, and it was about Korean Americans, and they were like, what do you know about Black people? And the Koreans said, well, I know on TV they're you know, they're thieves, they're thugs, okay, so that's what they're learning. They don't know any Black people. They're seeing what's on American television. Well, who runs the TV stations? Is it Black men? Is it white women? No, it's mostly white men who own the TV stations. You know, when Bill Cosby tried to own a station, what happened to him? All of a sudden, I'm not saying he wasn't guilty. I'm just saying we need people, you know, because we're all minorities in a sense. Not minorities, but we're not white men. I'm not trying to point fingers. I'm just saying that, you know, we have to look at who owns who runs everything here. Like, do any of us? I mean, I don't know, maybe.
And I think we also got to look at how stereotypes are used to divide minorities amongst themselves.
Absolutely.
Because
oh my God.
It's like, really? You know, we should all be seeing through this. Like, if there's a lot of stereotypes about you, chances are you're not like running everything, because then there wouldn't be all those stereotypes about you.
Like I said, what's the white man stereotype? When have they been oppressed?
And
actually, the stereotype is powerful, strong, in charge.
Yeah,
so
stereotype. It's COVID came from the Asians, AIDS came from the Blacks.
Look at all the movies.
And their Thor and their
look at all the movies, all the museum. They got enough. There's more than enough for them, you know. So we are really marginalized. We just don't have a little voice. That's all we have right now. So we're far, far beyond to go to be equal. When I came here with a dream of search, when I look at all the society, all the things, wow, I know there's a long way to go to get everybody to have that dream, you know, with Martin Luther King. When I was in China, I even read Martin Luther King's, you know, famous quote, everybody will be equal. But I came here for 40 years, almost 40 years, I recognize how difficult it is, because we don't have a power, we don't have a system. So, but this election, I see all the people, I was so moved. I see that African-American lady have a little baby, sit on the chair, hold umbrella, wait for many, many hours, long time. She said she got to vote. So I think only until everybody, you know, weakening, they have the right for their children, for their future generation. They do everything they can do for every movement. Things will not change. Who wants to give their prestigious, their right? So they don't want to give to somebody else. We work twice as much as hard, gets a half percentage, like 50% of what they got, or even less. They got 90%, it will get 10%. I don't want to paint the dark picture, but that's real reality. You look at movie. One time I look at Hollywood. Finally, they have a movie about that stock market crash. Who buy them out? They make all the profit. All the taxpayer buy them out. So they got all the profit. So it's really unfair system.
Danny, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, that's a really important point, the economic power. Who holds that power? That's who has control. And that's actually something that came up today with my therapist, actually. I was talking about feeling microaggressed and having experienced racism at college. And then my therapist is white, and we have our moments. It's kind of like hard to talk about with her. And her response was, well, you know, kind of what you experienced, I could experience too, even though I'm white, because it's a class thing sometimes. And although like I can see where she's coming from to a degree. Like it's not the same. She's not being oppressed because she's white, but she was in the situation that I presented, like my rich white roommate was like being rude to me and treating me as less than and microaggressing me. I could see where my white therapist was coming from, because white people can sometimes experience that class oppression, but it's not the same as what people of color experience, as well as like being oppressed by being a poor person of color, and or being a poor woman of color who is queer, which is all me. So yeah, it was just really interesting because we have to factor in that economic factor of, and I think that's where maybe we can create some sort of solidarity like between races, and how we can like maybe like it was said, like how can we convince people in power, white people in power, to give up that power, and how can we convince them to see our struggle. And that was a way where I found that I connected with a white person on how they felt like they could relate to my struggle of like oppression, which was interesting. It was like a little thought exercise. I had to take a moment and be like, okay, how could you possibly equate this? But it makes some sense.
Yeah. And like Alex was saying, they it's like there's some fear that Black people are going to start jumping in their backyards, kicking their doors in, and they're buying up all the guns and bullets. It's their guilt. You know, it's like, I didn't have a problem with Aunt Jemima being on the box. I don't have a problem with it. What Black person said, take that off, or Uncle Ben? It's their guilt. It's not, we didn't have, like, we're like, hey, we didn't, that's not a problem. There's other problems we have, but that's not, why does that make them feel better? Anyways, it's like you said, it's, you're right, Danny. And like Reverend Wilkins, you know, you guys all hit it on the head. Anita, you guys hit it on the head. You know, it's like, we need them to feel comfortable and know that we're not out to get them. You know, in the Bible, it talks about, you know, love wins. Ultimately, love will win. You know, it will win. If we approach things out of love, there's two feelings: love and fear. Everything else stems from love and fear. Compassion comes from love. Fear is hate and everything else. Their fear comes from the past or sins of the father. I don't know, but we're compassionate. Black people are naturally compassionate people. We're not, you know, we're not out to get no one. We just want to be treated like everyone else. At the end of the day, take off our skin spacesuits or whatever, the 3D, whatever you see, take that off, and we all want the same thing. We just want to live and be treated equally. And, you know, you get what you work for, kind of thing. You know, it's you want to be treated the way you treat people. And that's all we want. You know, there's, you know, it's a trick.
Yeah,
I would just like to add that I see this time as a gift. It's really an opportunity, because look at who's on this call, and our ability to hear each other, to listen to each other, to have compassion for each other, and to be willing to stand for each other. That's to me, one of the benefits of what has happened, is it opens us all up to say, we're better together, we're stronger together. And that is, we operate together, we can make a difference. So out of tragedy, I believe opportunity is right at our footsteps.
I also think when you look back to like two dates, you know, over the past 4 years, clearly January 6th this year, and also back to Charlottesville, you saw the true extent of what that white fear looks like. And it's this fear that they're losing their country, and that you know, all these diverse religious racial groups are going, and different sexual orientations are trying to replace them, or that they're going to, if they don't think that per se, the other more moderate ones just feel uncomfortable by it, and it makes them be like, oh well, if you know my neighborhood's going to look like this, then my neighborhood isn't going to be my neighborhood anymore. I'm not going to be comfortable here. I'm going to have to, you know, learn a second language or something, and this person is going to be competing with me for a job that I deserve.
So,
And I think people are after them, but nobody is after them. People are just trying to live.
so that's something I want to mention to you my experiences. I live in a Rust Belt, like North Minnesota, you know, close to North Dakota, those places. I heard a lot of, because there's a lot of even white people, a worker, like they're suffering. They're just, you know, there's a lot of very conservative attitude there. Some people, they say, oh, we retrieve from Los Angeles. There's just so many minorities take over California. We have to go back to here, you know, stuff like that. They're making those languages because I think a lot of people, I think they're stuck in that corner. I can see they don't have opportunity for education. They don't have opportunity for job change. They're suffering. They're part of a suffering in the system for the change. But those the 1%, or 10% white people, the people control the system. They don't even care about them, you know. But those people, so they're so afraid about this, because they go to West Coast or somewhere like you say, they see all the like Asian, African, and all different people. They get lost. They feel like they're going to take over the world. That's why you see Trump is getting on the stage, because those are group of people that they feel they will, it's their struggle, you know, their life and death, the future struggle. So we are living a very interesting time. I see is our country have to adapt to accept multicultural equality for the people, move along with climate change, bring to the new green revolution, new changes. There are a lot of, not only, you know, like there are a lot of white conservative, those people, they're not well educated. Sometimes they get lost. They're very, they're not less concerned than Asian American, African American. They feel they're in the life and death in the future. You know, they don't have their system anymore. So we are in a transition. We need a strong leadership to lead everybody, live as unify as a humanity with equal opportunity, with those big dream that we designed for America, not on the paper, but on the reality. So somehow from education, from a culture, who is going to do this job to make this happen? That's the direction we're going in the future, because now you will see a lot of statistics. In California, there's 40% Mexican American. So there's more than 10% Asian. So then, you know, the white people become minority. So those are something in the future, something will change. The multiculturalism, really, we have to live in harmony to the society. I think California is really a test ground for that.
Alex, do you have time to say something? You want to start on your presentation? I can't hear you, Alex. You're muted.
By 8:35, we'll start on the presentation.
Okay, I just want to say something, a couple of things, 2 quick points. One is that as a minority group, you know, you have 2 choices. One, to use it as a position of becoming an ally and to recognize, that we are all, part of the same whole, and have compassion and empathy for other groups. And the other thing is, the other side of it, the darker side, is that some people start to identify with the people who are in power, and so that's why sometimes you see people voting against their own, best interest. So that is a very delicate situation. You'll see sometimes like, why are you voting for people who basically want to keep you in that same position, but they identify themselves with the oppressor? That's just the psychological mindset. That was one thing I was going to say, and that's an unfortunate situation. But the other thing I was going to say is, I'm also very wary of othering people. I don't really feel comfortable saying white people, because that is also an othering kind of a categorization. Maybe you want to say, those people who feel like their situation is threatened by being in the category of, think of themselves as white supremacists or something, because, I don't really feel making that kind of a general blanket, comment about any group. I just want to be cautious about that, not to other any group, whether it's whatever color, even if it's, the group that has hegemony. So.
I agree with you. I just want to say this before we also move on to the presentation. And if anybody wants to like chime in on it. So I think that's really true. I think that you got to be careful even with how you talk about white people, because, everybody has feelings and it doesn't feel good to be othered. And everyone here, myself included, we all know that. We know what it feels like to be othered. And if we want to be productive in resolving racism and hatred, we got to keep that in mind. And the other thing I just want to keep in mind is that while women, even white women, Jewish Americans, and definitely globally, Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, Muslim Americans, they have all been oppressed in one form or another. But I still feel at the end of the day, even though redlining is no longer a thing, there's an invisible redlining that exists in America. So while we may all have our areas where we aren't treated the same, we're more likely to be victims of hate crimes. We're more likely to maybe get treated better for a bit, but then as soon as something bad happens, the blame will start coming to us, and we'll move down a spot in the invisible redlining into the orange zone or the yellow zone. And who knows, maybe if things get really bad, into that red zone. But there's still like a hierarchy to it. And that's what white supremacy's created. And that divides minority groups within themselves. And still, because the United States of America and the history of slavery and the history of Jim Crow, colonialism across the world. And I still think you can't help but say that, Black people in the US, Native people in the US have a very unique experience that still put them in that that invisible redlined community. And we could all acknowledge the areas where maybe we have been oppressed while still acknowledging that it's not necessarily the same, even if it's not okay.
Very well said, Alex. Very well said. Like you said, and Anita, I agree with you 5,000,000%. You're right. We're not gonna, and like Alex said, we're not gonna get nothing done by pointing fingers or othering people. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, the truth is the truth, and we need some certain people to speak up.
Yes.
You know what I mean? At the end of the day.
I call it the wake up time. Mm-hmm. Because some of the things that I have helped lead groups on is colorism, because even within their communities that don't even acknowledge the levels of colorism they have in the Indian community, in the Hispanic community, and people have admitted it. If you're lighter and Hispanic, you're treated differently than if you're darker and Hispanic. And there's a caste system that they're trying to pull out of India, but this exists all over, and we don't talk about that very often, but it's all a part of hopefully our growth in growing into being more understanding of each other.
You're right. It's also in the Black community too. You know that.
Oh,
Carol.
absolutely.
You know, it's like light skin, dark skin. You know, it's like I get from dark skinned guys. They feel like I'm not, you know, as strong, or I'm, you know, I'm not as, I don't know what it is. It's there's the light skin hate, or I don't know, you know, but they need to love themselves and not hate me because I'm white. It's ridiculous.
I mean, yeah. So we do gotta move on to our presentation. I'll say, Rick, that I actually was seeing during the NBA dunk contest, this guy, Anafree Simpson, what he won the dunk contest, and he's quote unquote light skin, right? And when he did a dunk where he kind of like kissed the rim, people were like saying how that's like the most light skin thing to do ever.
Look, I don't make the truth. I'm just reporting it. That's exactly.
that just cracked me up. But I do think it's really still like, you know, acknowledge everybody's experiences, and that like, yeah, unless you're a white and Christian, you're not going to be at that top of that hierarchy, and you may be bumped down a level, bumped up a level, but there's levels to this, and that's by design. So for the presentation, I just wanted, thanks to Danny for helping and really just making this herself, honestly. You're doing all the work, you're great. Asian discrimination and the history of it in the US. So how the policy shapes content. All right. So just going back to 1850, there was a Foreign Miners Tax Act, and it required, you know, tax of $20 per month to all foreign miners. You know, that doesn't seem like a lot by our times, you know. It's not much. We just throwing out 20s all the time. It's not even Andrew Jackson anymore. It's a Harriet Tubman, right? It's becoming one at least. But 20 is nothing now, but then $20 is a lot. That's how inflation is. So the act was protested by English, Irish, Canadian, German miners. So it ended up being rewritten to exclude miners who were quote unquote free white people, which really in particularly screwed over Asian immigrants, who the men often would come over from China, for example, and they would get to mining on the West Coast. But this provided a challenge for them that wasn't there for the white miners. And it later turned into Foreign Miners Tax License 1852, which charged non-US miners $3 per month. So work opportunities and discrimination is another area where Asian Americans were targeted. You could look back to 1869 with the Transcontinental Railroad, which drew many Chinese immigrants to America. They were paid subpar wages and they worked in poor conditions, while white workers, you know, found that jobs were taken by the Chinese immigrants. And as a result, Chinese workers were seen as an existential threat to the Western world. This is very similar to how, you know, today Hispanic immigrants are portrayed often. It's like where someone will be like, they're coming, they're taking our jobs. And it's like, you know, they're not taking your jobs, they're filling vacancies. Not many white Americans or any Americans who've been here for a while wants to be doing those jobs in the Central Valley, for example. It's not, or just a lot of other lower wage jobs. These are jobs that are traditionally held by new immigrants, but unfortunately, new immigrants get blamed for stealing them as well. So furthermore, with this, in 1869, news outlets in LA began to condemn Asians and presented them as immoral and inferior. So in 1871, you see the result of the consequences of hate and discriminatory policy. It started when two Chinese mutually benefit associations entered a shootout against each other over a kidnapping. And the shootout resulted in a killing of a civilian and a wounding of a police officer. And a mob of 500 Americans, 10% of the city's population, stormed the Chinatown and hung nearly 24 Chinese immigrants. Only one of them was involved in the gunfire. And that's once again a similar story that you could see in Black America, with often the forgotten about Black Wall Street and the massacre that took place in Tulsa. A group in power kind of becomes mad at, in that case, success of a group. In this case, an incident that happened, and then they stereotype basically all as being a part of the same thing, and they attack. It's basically America's versions of pogroms, which would happen in Eastern Europe with the purges of Jews. I don't think there's really been a word for it, though, in the American sense. And then 25 mob members were indicted, but only 10 stood trial, with 8 being convicted of manslaughter. All the other charges were overturned on a technicality, so no members of the mob faced charges, which sounds an awful lot like, what we still see today with whenever a police officer goes on trial pretty much for killing a Black person. So the history of this, you could just kind of see how it plays out today. There was also the infamous Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, signed into by President Chester Arthur, which made the immigration of all Chinese laborers to the U.S. illegal. And it was one of the more notable examples of Asian discrimination in the country. If you look at it, the numbers of Chinese immigrants declined substantially from 39,500 in 82 to only 10 in 1887. And by 1924, all Asian groups, with exception of a few Filipino groups, were excluded by the law. And I'm assuming that was just because Filipino groups were, the Philippines was a US colony. But the rest were denied citizenship and naturalization and prevented from marrying Caucasians owning land. And once again, today, you see recently with like the Muslim bans that were suggested over the past years, how history repeats itself. The tidings in of 1935, I actually had no idea what this was at all, but it placed an annual quota of 50 people of Filipino migration. So that excluded tons of them from even getting into the US. And then Japanese internment during World War II. That was a huge one. Basically, Pearl Harbor happens, and the US, it needed an excuse to get into World War II, but Americans didn't want to get into the war because, truth be told, they didn't have a problem with what Germany was doing. They saw what Germany was doing as maybe fair, maybe justified. It wasn't really their problem. But when Japan attacked with Pearl Harbor, then it became a problem, and that was use enough to get into the war. I actually had a thing personally where I've always said, jokingly, that I'm grateful for Pearl Harbor because I don't think I would have been alive today if it wasn't for it. Which is just kind of a harsh truth. But for Asian Americans, particularly Japanese Americans, that happening got blamed on all US Japanese citizens. They were seen as being responsible. Maybe they were spies, maybe they were working for the Japanese government, and they were invaders. And FDR signed into a law the internment camps, and Japanese were sent off to these camps. And now maybe they weren't treated as harshly as in the concentration camps as Europe. But meanwhile, while we were fighting against that, we were still putting our own people in camps, which, you know, is pretty hard to wrap your head around in a lot of ways. Especially like if you ever driven up through like the Eastern Sierras, you'll go by Manzanar, which was one of the larger Japanese internment camps. After 1965, with the Immigration and Nationality Act, there was a lot of change that actually happened. Huge waves of immigrants from Asia would start to come in, as has been seen pretty regularly since. And the federal government began placing preference on skilled workers, and China, Korea, Japan, a lot of these Asian countries happen to have a lot of skilled workers. A lot of really smart and talented people came over to the US in search of a better life. And that's when, you know, the Asian population of the US really started to boom. And it's been starting to really grow ever since. But that doesn't mean that there hasn't been risks that have come with even the general move towards accepting Asians. There's still a lot of different issues that people of Asian descent still face in the US. So, sorry. This could be in the form of hate crimes like we've seen today. You know, some of which have been stirred up by the former president, Trump, when he would refer to it as the Chinese virus and the Kung flu. It's the Kung flu. Now, I don't know if Trump meant to be racist there, at least when he said Chinese virus. I don't know. But what I do know is that when people started taking racist action, he didn't do anything. And he kept saying, the Chinese virus, it's a problem. It's not my fault. It's their fault. The Chinese did it. They started this. Like a third grader. That's basically how he sounded. And people thought it was okay to then go and spit on an Asian immigrant, blame an Asian immigrant for bringing COVID into the country. Meanwhile, at the same time, they were wearing a mask and they were spreading COVID, and they didn't even think COVID existed. And it doesn't really make sense. But that's how racism is a lot of the times. It doesn't need to make sense. And as a result, many Americans started to target Asians more. And they just saw it as an excuse to basically let out your anger on an Asian American. So there have been like these posters that you can see here of resistance effort to save these International Hotel, which was a hotel in San Francisco in 1977. It housed Asian Americans who were facing eviction for corporate development. So you could just take a look at these posters right here. It says like, in a city short on housing, ellipses, you goes a long way. Save the International Hotel. Yes, on you. And like another image there. There's also the 1985 novel by Nancy. This looks to be an image from it. You can see a little Asian girl. Looks like right by a red beach. Maybe that's a nuke or something, but or clouds and some birds flying. It was about a skill screen created in commemoration of the anniversary of the Hiroshima Nagasaki bombings. So yeah, I was right. It was a nuke. and expressing concerns for the future generations, what's to come. And when we look at that, you also see these like, you know, dance company within these walls. And that's a dance company that's based in San Francisco, that focuses on the Asian American improv arts. It's integrated multimedia contemporary dance project, has like, you know, 14 performers, and they run these shows relating often to like Asian American history and that immigrant experience, as well as like a lot of the discrimination and experience, just what Asians may face in the US. So, and then when we look at that, I think one of the other things that's really good to talk about too is just what are these forms of discrimination? How do they manifest? We see it with COVID. We see that people blame COVID on Asian people as opposed to the government or just natural phenomena. And you can't do that. That's not right. But then we also see particular discrimination towards Asian women with sexualization and fetishization. And so personally, I don't know if the recent event in Atlanta, that shooting, I can't say if that was a hate crime. He may have just been a sex addict, and he was clearly had those issues. He went to rehab for his sex addiction. He also was, you know, clung to the Bible fervently. And while there's nothing wrong with that, he probably seemed to be someone who had through him instilled values that made him hate himself for his sexual addiction. So while it may have not been a hate crime, it's also possible that he fetishized women of Asian backgrounds, and that drove him to do it. And I think that brings you to a weird spot too, where it's like an action may not even be a hate crime, but that doesn't mean it wasn't rooted in bias or stereotypes or the powers of white supremacist ideologies and how they spread. So there may have been a racialized motive in the hate crime that the shooter himself wasn't even aware about. And to me, that shows a lot of the dangers of stereotypes, hatred towards Asian Americans, and different forms of violence that you can see. But Danny, you wanted to say something?
Oh yeah, the painting, A Future for Our Children, it was presented to, or said to be a novel, but it's a painting, a silk screen painting.
All right, thank you.
So,
But
Alex, I want to just echo your point, because from what I have been engaged with all the network, and I read all the information, and seem to be this guy is targeted an Asian-owned business. So there's a big, strong element of a hate in there. So, you know, if you just against just the sex, there's a lot of sex around. Why you just targeted all the Asian business? Not only one, multiple. He want to take them away, take them all away. It's like racist driven, plus sex. Those sex I mentioned to you. There's a lot of media. They just made Asian women as a sex slave, and all in the movie, all the things they just that's what they represented. So I think there's a lot of complicated background stuff behind this thing. So it's hard to use one word, so yes or no, to just conclude that.
What do other people think? Like, just with that shooting too, like, maybe you don't think it was a crime, maybe you do, but do you think that history still was a contributing factor?
Well, it seems like did you just recite that there's like 3,500 or something in that ballpark of various kinds of crimes of hate crimes, I guess, against Asian Americans? It's not just that one event, but there's just been plethora of events. And I saw a letter that I was not going to repost of some person, some business owner that received very disgusting hate mail, and I guess they were asking for support, but I'm sure there's been all sorts of things going around beyond that one event, whether or not that event was directly a hate crime or not. But we can't deny the weight of the evidence that there's just been a massive influx of those kind of actions. So it's a big problem that we need to face.
And how do people think we face it? Does anybody ever feel like, because people may say now, Asian lives matter, which they definitely do, but would anybody maybe think, okay, that's distract someone think that, how are we supposed to then, build these coalitions maybe, so all these different groups are able to kind of join and hold hands together?
You froze up, Alex. You said you cut off at distracting or distraction. What did you say? I'm sorry.
No, I was saying that, that some may think that, oh, if people are saying Asian lives, a distraction from Black Lives Matter, right?
No.
Or they may think that, like, is it okay to be using that term?
Yeah. What
now?
Yeah. It's about human life. It's not about a term. Like, who cares? Like, we that's where the compassion comes in. That's our term. You can't, like, what is that? Like, it's all about coming together. If someone feels like that, that's childish. We all, everyone's lives matters at the end of the day. And for someone to argue over a phrase or the way it's used is so stupid. You know what I mean? So no, we're fully behind that. I am. I mean, everybody I know is behind that. It would be ridiculous to think that something like that is see, that's where the separation and stuff continues. I would hope no one here feels that, well, that's our phrase, or I feel like that's taking the spotlight off of our lives because our lives matter, look, we, as Blacks, we have, Black Lives Matter, and the Black Lives Matter movement is based on the police and Blacks, but we have some cleaning up to do ourselves in our own communities. And that's my focus is, how do how can we call for compassion if we're out here killing each other just as much as they are? We need to show them that our lives matter by having compassion for ourselves. So we can't be out here like saying this is our phrase, and it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
So how would we maybe though, like, say, okay, should all these movements necessarily though be separate, or should there be sort of more a meshing of the movements together?
It should be a meshing.
Well, the things that we had that conversation last time, I thought we were trying to distinguish between institutionalized racism. I mean, I don't think Asian people need to worry about the police coming after them. There's a difference between racism and institutionalized racism. And I think Black Lives Matter is unique because that is addressing institutionalized.
That's true. But like you said, in order to make things happen, you have to come together. You're right. But in order for, they need to, like the Asians need to come out for us and march for the police. There's a separation in the way we're discriminated against, sure, but that doesn't mean we have to be separated in our mission for the same thing.
I totally agree, 100%.
Yeah.
I just think that term refers to something very specific, but definitely I think we should all be very, very vigilant about any kind of racism and discrimination in our communities. It is perpetrated by anybody. So
that's why we all need to come out together, like you said earlier, Anita.
Exactly.
We have to support each other because, we're all humans, and we need to care about humans. So, it doesn't matter what phrase or how we do it. I feel like we all need to come together. That's the only way we're going to win. That's the only way we have to win through love, and not just love of self, but the love of others.
I'm totally with you, Big Rick, 100%.
Well, I will say yes, and because I think you still have to look at, there are unique situations of different places, but then you come together. It's the teachings of King and Gandhi and Mandela. They all taught the same thing, which I've taught for years. And in moving toward peace and nonviolence, everyone is included, but you still have to have strategies perhaps that are defined by different groups. So you don't want to cut off one. They can all operate together.
And, we have to start within our own communities if we're having problems within our own communities, because we have to show that we value ourselves to them, whether we see it or not. We have to show that we value ourselves, and to get them to see that, hey, we value ourselves. You need to value, but if they can turn around and say, well, you guys do this, and we don't have an argument, you're absolutely right, you guys. I agree with you. We just, it all starts with ourselves in the mirror. And then from there.
Absolutely. The man in the mirror.
And in the mirror.
Begin with peace, yourself, and with being able to manage your own reaction. And then you can be in the same place with somebody else.
That's why
But it takes more learning, because there have been years of abuse of so many people. So I think we have to be gentle and loving of each other.
You all have said it so well, and I just wanted to, I put in something in the chat earlier about something that a friend and I were talking about, just exactly everything that has been said tonight, just like all the division that we are creating within ourselves, within our movements, and we need to bring all these things together, working on ourselves, of course, first. And I think I thought maybe that's what this group might be, like helping heal, finding ways with art. I don't know. This is my first time here, but yeah, I think thinking about how we want to move forward and really, manifesting and really setting concrete things on how we want our future to look like. I think this is really where we're at. People are realizing that we do need to come together, I think, more and more, because it's so apparent and so, with social media, it's very, very clear, I think. So thank you all for sharing.
Yeah, well, we do have to wrap it up for tonight, and
Yes.
thanks, Jennifer. I would just say to close out that, whenever a movement like this kind of comes about, don't just immediately go and be like, you don't deserve a movement, or like, you don't have any oppression, everybody treats you fine, but they don't treat us fine, or like, you're making it up. Don't gaslight other people, basically. Don't make them feel like they're not deserving of, their moment, as a group. But also don't racialize people all the time. Don't discriminate against people. You don't need to act like you're a victim either, some may say, because there's this, idea that everybody in America feels they're a victim. And to an extent, maybe that can happen, but it's still based in a reality where people have been victimized and brutalized, and not everybody necessarily knows how to deal with that as a society. It's things we're trying to come to grips with. But if there's a rise in hate crime against one group of people, listen to them. I think it's really that simple. Don't come out and say that you're wrong for feeling what you feel. There's a reason people feel what they feel. And 99% of the time, it's going to be legitimate. So I think if we really want that progress, all we got to do is just open up our minds and our ears and hear people out, even if we don't necessarily understand what their experience may be.
And let's end with Faye Love's favorite words. She always said this: compassion is love in action. Compassion is love in action. That's what we're talking about, really, right?
Yeah.
And connecting people. And sometimes just like, I don't know, sometimes it seems like you just call attention to people, what they're saying. I had a friend who was a professor for 20 years, I did exhibitions with her. She was a poet and writer. And sometimes people would say things to us that were so blatantly prejudiced or so, shocking that I would feel anger, but she taught me to how to say things back to people so that they hear what they said, and then it opens up a conversation. She'd lean forward to that. I remember one time we were talking to this doctor who was talking about poor women, blah blah blah, and she said, "Excuse me, could you repeat that?" It was a really it sounds so simple, but it was a learning experience because it made him repeat what he said, and he couldn't do it because the second time he said it, he realized how prejudiced it was. So sometimes it's just, I don't know. That's why I love art, because it's a way to get people to think about something without, like wagging your finger and making them feel ashamed, I guess. But maybe they should be ashamed. Anyway, good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good night.
Great job, Alex.
Great
Thank
job,
you.
Alex.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
See you later.
Yeah.
You're gonna be there on Saturday, right?
Yeah.
Okay, there.
Bye.